We have 2 pounds of ground lamb. Some people like to make it 50% lamb, 50% beef, but we're going all lamb today. And the first thing we have here is 1 onion that's been liquefied and the liquid was removed, and so you just have the pulp from the onion. And so we're putting that in. 3 cloves of garlic minced. 1 teaspoon of salt, about half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of pepper, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of sumac, which you can buy in a Persian store. Finally, half a teaspoon of turmeric. Oh, the wind carried some away. And then you want to mix this real well until it's uniform, so it's going to take a lot of mixing. Now you can do this with a spoon like I was doing, or you can do it with your hands. You're going to get your hands dirty anyway because you're going to be putting these on a skewer. Next you want to take a flat skewer, and this will not work with anything other than a flat skewer. Take the meat and start working it onto the skewer like that. The key is to get it even all around, even thickness, and not too large because the weight is going to cause it to fall off of the skewer. So you want to get it even as you can on the skewer, but not too thick. You want to adjust the placement of the meat to where your coals are going to be on the grill. So before I started putting this meat on, I did a little measurement by eye just to see where my coals are going to be positioned in relation to the skewer when it goes on. And that's about the thickness you want it on the skewer. We're going to put the skewers right over the coals, and we're not cooking a whole lot, so we don't need a ton of coal for this. And we're going to let it cook for at least 5 minutes. You want to turn these periodically to make sure, number 1, they're not getting burned, and number 2, that they're staying on the skewer. Now, if you have meat that's not cooperating with you when you start and you feel like it might fall off, one trick is to wrap it in saran wrap and put it in the fridge for about 40 minutes to an hour before you cook. Alright, now when you're down to about 5 to 10 minutes, you want to put on some Roma tomatoes, and we're putting them off the hottest part of the fire, but still it's pretty hot. You don't want it to burn on any side, but you want it to get a nice golden color, so we're going to keep turning it until we get to that color. And here you can see the char, just when you start to see a little bit of char and also that golden color from the turmeric. That's how you know you're getting close. So when this side looks a little more like that side, we can pull them off. Oh yeah, now we want to turn the tomatoes. See, when they start to get that little golden color and char, a little bit of char, you want to turn it. You want to keep turning it periodically to make sure it's cooking evenly on all sides. You want to just keep checking on those tomatoes and turning them. See, it's basically evenly cooked on all sides, so we're going to pull them off. When you start to feel that the tomato is starting to get soft on all sides, that's when you want to pull it off. Here, this one, there's still parts of this tomato that are hard. This one's a little better. So you just keep turning it until you feel that the whole tomato is soft, starting to be soft all around, and then you want to pull it off. You don't want to burn it or fry it. So what we have here is 1.5 pounds of chicken breast, and the first step is going to be to remove this fat on the outside, and then to cut this up into cubes that are about an inch on each side. Now this doesn't have to be perfect, you just want to get them roughly to be like cubes, but obviously in some parts it's not going to be possible, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, as I said, we have 1.5 pounds of chicken here, so when you make this at home, adjust the proportions accordingly. We're going to start with 3/4 tablespoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of turmeric. Alright, we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of saffron, and 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. It's going to be 1/3 cup of olive oil, and roughly the same amount of lime juice. And we're also going to add about 2 teaspoons of Greek yogurt. Actually, I'm adding about 1.5. And for this amount, we're also going to add about 1/2 an onion to help tenderize the meat. Now we're going to add this in, the onion in, and mix this all up very well. The key is to make sure it's mixed up extremely well to get all the spices even. Alright, now we're going to put this in the refrigerator and let it marinate from anywhere from 6 hours to overnight. And this is very important when you take it out before you put it on the skewers. You want to make sure that the meat reaches room temperature, and that could take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, but you want to make sure that meat is room temperature before you start cooking it. Otherwise, it's not going to be good. Alright, now we're going to skewer the meat. And how you want to do this is, first of all, make sure you remove the onion, because all it's going to do is burn. It's already tenderized the meat, so it's done its job. When you skewer the meat, you want to leave just a little space between the pieces, like so, so that it can cook all around and it's not going to be raw on the inside. You want to let the heat get in between the little crevices here. It doesn't have to be too far apart, but just enough to let the heat get in. Alright, what we've done here is we've arranged the coals in a way that they're going to be right under the skewers when we put them in. And these coals are very hot. They're white hot with a little bit of a red flame underneath. And the reason is because this grill is kind of deep, so the coals are not going to be directly under the skewers. Alright, I've just flipped these. They've been on here for about 4 minutes. They're taking on a beautiful golden brown color. And it's okay if you have just a little char, it's fine, but once you start to see that char is when you want to flip them. So we're going to give this about another 4 to 5 minutes on the second side, and then we'll see if we need to turn them or adjust them a little bit before they're done. But as you can see with the high heat, these cook very quickly. Alright, it's been about another 4 minutes. We're going to check them, and they're perfect, pretty much perfect. What I'm going to do is just give them another minute just on the side. This is a little tricky, but normally if you have a proper grill for this, you can set them this way, but since we don't, I'm just going to do it manually. I just want to hold it on its side just to make sure the sides get some heat, and it's not going to be too long. maybe 45 seconds to a minute. This is what they look like when they're done. As you can see, they're brown on the sides and they're brown evenly all around. Okay, so if you're worried it might not be done, you can just cut into one, and if it's all white on the inside, you're good to go. If there's pink, you can put it on for another minute or two until it's white on the inside. But we're gonna go ahead and take these off. Here we have a little more than 1.5 pounds of lamb shoulder chop. Parts of it are bone, but you want to start by cutting it into pieces that are roughly 1 inch per side. Like that. That's about right, or a little bigger than that. Now, once we've cut the meat away from the bone, it looks like we have just about 1 pound or over 1 pound. So adjust the proportions accordingly. We're going to start with about half an onion. I got a whole onion here, but I only need to use about half for this amount. And I've salted the onion to draw some of the moisture out of it. And what the onion is going to do is tenderize the meat. We're going to use about 1/4 teaspoon of saffron. We're going to do about 3/4 teaspoon of salt. 2 or 3 cloves of garlic for flavor. 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of sumac, half a cup of olive oil, and the juice from 1 lime. Mix it all together. And then let it marinate for at least 1 hour, preferably longer. I like to put it in the fridge for a couple of hours while I'm doing other preparation. You want to leave just a little space between the meat so that the heat can get in and it can cook evenly on all sides. Putting the tomatoes on a skewer as well. The tomatoes make a perfect combination with the lamb, so we're going to cook them together. We're going to put them right over the coal and turn them periodically to make sure they don't get burned on any side or get too dry on any side. Keep a close eye on it and keep turning it as necessary. For the tomatoes, we're going to put a little bit of olive oil on the tomatoes like that, and it'll flare up for a bit, but that's okay. Hit them with a little bit of sumac on the tomatoes. And then we're going to turn and do the same thing. And a little bit of sumac on this side. And you can see it's already, the charring process is already taking place. So we've had these on for about 8 minutes. We've been consistently turning them and kind of rotating them to make sure they get even heat distribution across the whole skewer. And you can see in parts where you start getting just a little bit of char, that's when you know it's done on that side. So here we're almost just about done with the skewer, and this one is close as well. So we got a lot of char on this side, so we're gonna cook it just a little bit longer on the other side and then pull it off. You can see we pulled the tomatoes just a little bit off the fire. When you see char on the outside of the tomato, that's not a bad thing, because the real part you're gonna eat is the inside, and you want the inside to cook really well. It will get a little bit charred on the outside. What we've done, we've pulled it off the direct fire. So still getting a good amount of heat, but it's not getting flame.
So we have about 1.75 pounds of salmon here. It's already been scaled. I highly recommend you have them do that for you at the store. And we're going to start by cutting it first lengthwise. You're going to need a pretty sharp knife to get through the skin. And then after that, we cut it into probably inch and a half thick pieces like this. We're gonna leave the skin on because it's the best part. We do a very basic marinade consisting of olive oil, lemon juice, some basic salt. Kosher salt is always the best way to go. Some powdered garlic and some hot chili powder. And then we mix it up. And then let it sit for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so skewering. Salmon is very flaky and it falls apart easily, so you have to be careful. And just skewer it lengthwise. And make sure you keep the skin side down for all of them so it's consistent. We've used 2 pieces of steel to kind of create a foundation for these skewers. And then on a high heat, we put the skewers down, skin side first. And the idea is you wait until you can see the salmon is cooked about 2/3 of the way up before you flip them. And then you flip them and do the other side. The time will vary based on the size of the pieces of salmon meat that you made. We're getting a couple flare-ups, but we're keeping it together, and we're going to start slowly turning them. This stuff is very delicate, so do it very carefully. And there you see the skin is nice and crispy. And then keep it for another couple minutes until you get a nice searing on the bottom, and we'll be done. Alright, we've waited. We got a nice little char on the meat side, and now we're going to pull them off. It will tend to fall apart, which is okay.
Okay, so what we have here is about 1.5 pounds of unpeeled shrimp, and the first step is to go ahead and peel the shrimp. Okay, so what we have here is our 1.5 pounds of peeled shrimp, and it's now time to spice it. So the first thing we're going to do is put anywhere from 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup of olive oil. We're then going to add approximately 2 teaspoons of salt. Okay, we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of pepper. Now you don't absolutely have to add this, but I like to add a little bit of garlic powder. And finally, again, not absolutely necessary, but I like to add a little bit of paprika or chili powder as well. Alright, we're then going to take a lime and squeeze the lime into the shrimp. Alright, now the important part is to make sure you mix this all up really well. So I'm going to mix it for a while. Alright, now if you can, try to find a kind of a flat skewer. That's going to make your life a lot easier, because when you flip it, the shrimp won't turn. The alternative is, if you're using wooden sticks, just use 2 sticks so that the shrimp won't turn when you have to flip it on the grill. The other trick here is to pierce the shrimp in 2 parts so that it doesn't turn. Again, as you can see here, I'm piercing it on one side and then through to the other side so it doesn't turn. So I'm going to put the skewers down right over the coals. As you can probably see, the coals are kind of arranged somewhat parallel right under the skewers. And I'm going to let those cook for approximately 5 to 10 minutes check to see if they're brown, and then flip them and cook them on the other side. Okay, these have been on for about 8 minutes, and we're going to check on them and see if we need to flip them. Okay, wow, as you can see, they're kind of turning a golden brown color, so that's perfect. We're going to flip them, and I predict we're going to leave them on for about another 7 minutes. Alright, now these have been on for approximately another 6.5 minutes, and we're going to check on them and see how they look. Look pretty amazing. I don't know if it's clear in the camera, but the color of them is kind of a dark orange brownish color, and that's what you want them to look like. So we're going to go ahead and pull these off. Alright, now what we've got here is some mini peppers. We have mushrooms, and we have tomatoes, which we took off the vine and cleaned. We want to slice up the onion into little sections that are roughly look like cubes. We're going to be using fairly large skewers. If you're using a smaller skewer, you can actually use smaller tomatoes and smaller vegetables, or you can cut them up into pieces. But since we're using a large skewer, we're going to be using larger sized vegetables. Alright, and we're ready to put these on. Now, if you want to make this look good, try to alter the colors a little bit, but that's purely aesthetic. It's not going to change the taste. Now, for any type of kebabs, if you want to make your life easier, I recommend investing in these flat skewers. They are there's a reason they're flat, which is that they keep things from turning when you're cooking and you flip the meat or the vegetable. It'll actually turn. Now, if you're using more of a round skewer, square, the trick is to actually use two, and that way when you flip it, the food will flip with it. It won't turn on the skewer. Alright, so if you can see in the grill, we've got the coals white hot, and they're distributed evenly across the bottom of the grill, so we have an even cooking surface. And so we're going to go ahead and put these veggies on. They're going to taste delicious even if you don't put anything on them, but to season them just a bit, I like to hit them with a little oil. Tiny bit of salt. And you can do the same thing when you flip them. Now, the key to cooking these vegetables is to turn them fairly frequently. This is not like cooking meat where you don't want to turn it too often. With the vegetables, you want to make sure that they don't burn and that they're cooked evenly, and it doesn't hurt to flip them when they're not actually making contact with the grill. After it's been about 3.5 minutes, and we're going to flip them and do the same thing. Hit it with some oil. And some salt. And that's it. At this point, you want to flip it about once every 2 minutes. When they look like this on both sides, it's going to be time to pull them off. Alright, now because it's not the heat is not exactly perfectly distributed, if you want to make sure that everything is cooking evenly, you can just kind of shift everything around a little bit. Make sure that all of the vegetables are getting a good amount of heat. It's okay to drop the cover on the grill if you're having trouble getting even heat, and just put it on and let the vegetables kind of cook and bake at the same time. Alright, these are ready to come off. It's been about 2.5 minutes with the lid closed.
To prepare the marinade, we will need 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar and half a tablespoon of soy sauce, as well as 1 minced clove of garlic, 1/4 teaspoon of thyme, black pepper, and some salt. We're gonna mix it up so the marinade is ready now. Now we're gonna cut the mushroom 1/4 inch thick. So now we're gonna add the mushrooms into the marinade. You gotta mix it up so that the marinade is covering the mushrooms really well. And we're gonna keep it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. Now we're gonna skewer the mushroom right in the middle. And we're just using basic wooden skewers. The next step is to place the mushroom on medium-high heat and grill it for 2 or 3 minutes per side. It's been 2 or 3 minutes, so now you can flip it. It's been another 3 minutes, so these mushrooms are ready to come off. As you can see, they're dark brown.